Many people lie, and some lies are more damaging than others. When celebrities lie, they're seen and believed by far more people. Revealing the truth can be the end of a celebrity's career, but other lies are kept under wraps until after that career is already over. Number 10. When the Varsity Blues scandal broke in 2019, influencer Olivia Jade didn't realize the seriousness of what her parents had done. They were both rich and famous celebrities, and it wasn't unusual for people like them to use that money and influence to get the best for their children. But the family had gone one step further than what was legal, and Olivia herself was caught up in the lie. The scandal surrounded one man, Rick Singer. He ran a company specializing in helping the children of rich and influential people get into top universities. But rather than coaching them for tests or helping to write essays, Singer's company paid bribes and helped to cheat in exams. Among the many parents that came to Singer for help were actress Lori Loughlin and her fashion designer husband, Massimo Giannulli. They first wanted help getting Olivia's sister into the University of South California. When it came to Olivia's time to apply for college, they enlisted this help again. Singer used various methods to get students a place at university. Some were given the answers to exam questions beforehand. Others took their exams in special centers, where proctors would change their answers after the tests were handed in. But with the Giannulli family, he took an approach that meant they wouldn't have to rely on exams. Olivia and her sister were tagged as athletic recruits. They would get into USC due to their experience and talent in competitive rowing. The problem with this was the fact that neither of them had any experience rowing. Olivia posed for photos on rowing equipment, which were supposed to support her academic credentials. For some of the students involved in the scandal, it's possible they had no idea just what their parents were doing. Olivia may not have known the full extent of the wrongdoings, but she was aware that she had no rowing experience. The fact that Olivia was pegged as an athletic recruit seemed strange to her school guidance counselor. He knew she was not a rower. Giannulli coached Olivia on what to say to get out of trouble with him. After the lies and a large bribe, Olivia was accepted into the university. She talked about going to school on her YouTube channel, where she said she wasn't looking forward to actually learning, but she was much more interested in the social events. Olivia was already enrolled in the university when news of the scandal broke. Her parents were arrested for fraud and bribery. Olivia and her sister were never arrested or charged for any crimes, though. Olivia would later tell the media that she didn't realize that they had done anything wrong. She was familiar with other rich and famous people making donations to universities, and she assumed that that was all her parents had done. Number 9. For most people, coming under enemy fire while flying over a war zone can be a terrifying and memorable experience. It's not surprising then that news anchor Brian Williams told his story of going through just that multiple times in the decades after the 2003 incident. The only problem with this was that the story was a lie. Brian Williams began working as a correspondent for NBC Nightly News in 1993. In 2004, he replaced the retiring Tom Brokaw as an anchor, as well as managing editor for the show. For the next 10 years, Williams was a reliable figure who many trusted to deliver honest news. When he wasn't delivering the news, he was making appearances on shows like The Daily Show and The Late Show with David Letterman. While on Letterman in 2013, he retold a story from his time covering the beginnings of the war in Iraq. According to Williams, he was flying in a convoy of Chinook helicopters when they came under fire from enemies on the ground. The helicopter he and his team were flying in was struck by a projectile and took damage. All the helicopters in the convoy dropped their loads and were forced to land in the middle of the desert. Luckily, he was flying with the U.S. tank platoon, who surrounded the downed helicopters and protected the stranded crew members from enemies on the ground. Most of the viewers at home would have been amazed by the story, but there were a few watching who were more familiar with what happened. They'd actually been in the helicopter in question, and they had no memory of Williams being there. Nobody called Williams out for it at the time, though. In January of 2015, Williams told the story again. This time, he was on the nightly news and attempting to make a segment praising the work of one of the soldiers who'd kept him and the rest of the team safe. After the show, NBC posted a clip to their Facebook page. That gave the soldiers who were actually there the perfect place to reveal the truth. What Williams described had actually happened. A group of helicopters did come under attack and were forced to land. Thankfully, nobody was injured. But the helicopters were badly damaged. It was over half an hour later that the helicopters carrying Williams and his team arrived. They were part of a different group, with the soldiers working on entirely different missions. The team had been following the story of the attack over the radio, and Williams had been very excited by it. When they landed, they filmed the damaged aircraft before leaving after a sandstorm passed. After being called out, Williams replied to the Facebook comments, admitting to the lie. He would later apologize on the news show, but even with the apology came a lie. He now claimed that they'd been following directly behind the helicopter that had been attacked, the same story that was reported in 2003, shortly after the incident actually happened. After 12 years, the memory of the event and the story they reported on became blurred together, and Williams remembered incorrectly. As investigations began into Williams' reporting, more lies were uncovered. Some were simple exaggerations of stories throughout the years, while others were completely false. After the investigation, Williams was demoted to breaking news anchor, but remained on air until 2021. Number 8. In 2005, tennis player Mariano Puerta was at the top of his career. But that would all come crashing down when he tested positive for a banned substance. It was a foul that could have ended his career, but a lie stopped Puerta from receiving a harsh punishment. In June of 2005, Puerta made it to the finals of the French Open. He faced off against Rafael Nadal. Like Puerta, Nadal had never made it to a Grand Slam final before. Nadal took the victory, and Puerta earned a career best of runner-up. The tennis world already moved on to other championships when news started to break that one of the Argentinian players had tested positive for a banned substance. There were a few players who could have been at fault, and Puerta denied that he was the one who'd been caught. But by December, it was clear that he was the person who tested positive. This would be Puerta's second offense. Years earlier, Puerta had tested positive for clenbuterol. It was a chemical found in asthma medication, but it also led to performance-enhancing applications, so it was listed as banned. He received a 9-month suspension as a penalty. If Puerta was found guilty again, he risked a lifetime ban. The substance this time was etilofree. Like the other substance, it had medical uses but was still banned. Puerta claimed he had not knowingly ingested the substance. Before the news broke, he told reporters he didn't even drink orange juice because he was so worried about accidentally taking something he shouldn't have. But he couldn't control what the people around him were doing. He told the court that his wife had taken the medication to help with her menstrual pain. He then had drunk from the same glass, which had been contaminated with the medication. The substance was only found in trace amounts and was far lower than what would be needed to actually make a difference in Puerta's performance. Considering all this, the court didn't want to punish Puerta too harshly as a penalty. He was suspended for 8 years, but even this they felt was too harsh. Later, it was reduced to 2 years. It would still seriously cripple his career, but Puerta was able to play competitively again in 2007. Puerta's career never reached the same heights as it had before his ban. He picked up some wins again, but retired in 2009. It was only years after this retirement that Puerta admitted the truth. According to Puerta, he had taken pills supplied by a friend of his trainer. They included caffeine and ginseng, which Puerta knew about. It also had trace amounts of the banned substance. That shouldn't have gotten Puerta into too much trouble, but he admitted that the pills had been supplied through less than legal means. Number 7. By the time Brian Dennehy made his acting debut, he'd already served with the U.S. Marine Corps for 5 years. His experience gave him an authentic edge to some of his portrayals, but he always emphasized that real wars were nothing like the movies. He would talk about his experience in the Vietnam War and the wounds he got for serving his country. But in 1999, it was revealed that this was all a lie. The subject of the Vietnam War came up a lot in interviews with Dennehy. While promoting his movie, The Belly of an Architect, he claimed that his experience in Vietnam liberated him. He told interviewers that his early acting career was put on hold as he was forced into compulsory service. While there, he realized just how short life could be. Tens of thousands of U.S. soldiers lost their lives in the conflict. Even though Bethonie managed to make it out alive, he realized that life could be over in an instant. When he returned to civilian life, he decided to chase the career he really wanted. Bethonie started acting on stage. It was only 2 years after the end of the Vietnam War that he made his movie debut. The first few roles were minor, but he found regular work, and after a few years he was taking on more lead roles. In 1982, the film that made him famous was released. Bethonie played Sheriff Will Teasel in the first Rambo movie, where he led a manhunt against troubled Vietnam War veteran John Rambo. Naturally, Bethonie's own experience would again be a popular topic in interviews about the film. Bethonie didn't want to glamorize his experience. He tried to emphasize that real wars were nothing like what was portrayed in the movies, and things were far more chaotic and not at all simple. When asked if he'd ever taken a life, Bethonie claimed that in conflict, any act like that was almost accidental. He emphasized that they were always trying to remain out of combat and avoid face-to-face confrontations. The true answer to that question was no, he'd never taken anyone's life. He hadn't served in Vietnam, or in any other war for that matter. Brian Bethonie had been in the US Marines for 5 years, between 1958 and 1963. War had started years earlier in Vietnam, but it wasn't until after the end of Bethonie's service that US combat troops were sent into the conflict. Rather than fighting in chaotic battles, Bethonie had been in Okinawa, where he played football for the Corps. Bethonie hadn't been wounded by shrapnel like he claimed, or any other way. Bethonie's life was called out in the 1999 book Stolen Valor. An actual Vietnam War veteran, B.G. Burkett, had been investigating claims by others pretending to have experiences in the same war. He was startled by just how many people lied about being Vietnam War veterans. Many had never even left their country. According to Burkett, the liars helped to share myths about the war and about the veterans. They helped to solidify the image of veterans as unemployed people who blamed the war for everything wrong in their lives, while Burkett claimed it wasn't the truth for most veterans. Bethonie may not have tried to promote that image, but he did lie about his experiences. After the lie was revealed, he confessed. He claimed he made up the story when he was a young man and then couldn't figure out a way to take it back. But even after Bethonie confessed to the lie, he still continued to claim to be a Vietnam veteran in later interviews. Number 6. In October of 2019, celebrity Coleen Rooney made a social media post that led to a media frenzy. She accused her former friend, Rebecca Vardy, of leaking stories about her to the press. Vardy denied it and tried to sue for libel. Her lies in the resulting court case were reported around the world. Like a lot of celebrities, Coleen Rooney had a private Instagram account, which only close friends and family members could view. There, she would share moments she didn't want the rest of the world to see. This was especially the case in September of 2017. Her husband, footballer Wayne Rooney, was in trouble with the police for drunk driving. It was obviously a stressful time for the family, and Coleen was worried about their marriage. She took their children to stay with her parents for a while and made a post about it on her private Instagram account. Not long after, the tabloid newspaper The Sun ran a story about the Rooneys, which quoted word for word Coleen's private post. She knew that someone she trusted had leaked the story, but she wasn't sure who. At the start of 2019, more stories from her account were leaked. Rooney had begun to suspect the wife of another footballer, a woman named Rebecca Vardy. The two had never been especially close friends, but she did have access to the private account. When Coleen was having problems, Vardy would message her and act friendly, but it seemed suspicious. Coleen changed the settings on her Instagram account, making it so that only Vardy could see certain stories. Then she made posts about going to Mexico to help having a baby girl, and the basement of her home flooding. The stories were completely fictional, but it was just believable enough. Both times, the stories later appeared in the Sun newspaper. The only way the paper could have gotten information on the stories was from the posts on Coleen's Instagram account, and the only person who could see those posts was Vardy, or someone using her account. Rooney broke the news in October of 2019. Vardy immediately denied any wrongdoing. Rooney had proof that only Vardy's account had seen the posts about the flood and Mexico trip, but Vardy claimed someone else must have had access to her account, but very few people believed her. In 2020, Vardy decided to take action against Rooney to clear her name. She tried to sue Rooney for libel. In libel cases, the best defense is that the person accused was telling the truth. It's not possible to sue for damages if those damages were caused by an accurate statement. Rooney was tasked with proving that Vardy was the person responsible for the leaks. In a week-long court case, text messages between Vardy and her agent were shown. The messages talked about leaking stories to the press, but only a small fraction of them could be viewed. Vardy claimed to have lost messages when she changed her cell phone. It was an excuse even her own expert thought was remarkable. Her agent's phone was also lost. It had been dropped overboard while on a boat in the North Sea. The defense team also showed how Vardy arranged for paparazzi to take photos of herself and other footballers' wives and girlfriends without their knowledge, and was seen trying to sit as close to Rooney as possible at matches. After a lengthy deliberation, the judge found in favor of Rooney. Vardy had been the one to leak the stories, and the judge described her evidence as inconsistent with documentary evidence, evasive, and implausible. Number 5. Brian Johnson made a name for himself as the social media star The Liver King. He amassed millions of followers as a fitness influencer, showing off his strength and physique in extreme challenges. He claimed all of this had been achieved through a so-called ancestral lifestyle. But in December of 2022, he admitted this was a lie. The fitness and diet industry is a big business. Research into human health is always evolving, and for many people, it can be difficult to keep up with what's considered the healthiest diet. It's much easier to turn to people who have apparently achieved the best lifestyle and take their advice. Body image problems and conditions like muscle dysphoria are also a growing issue. More and more people suffering from these conditions turn to the people they want to look like for answers. In 2021, Johnson became one of those people. By the time he started posting on social media as the Liver King, he already had a successful business selling supplements built on his ancestral lifestyle philosophy. Johnson didn't invent the idea of returning to a simpler way of living. Many fitness and lifestyle influencers share the idea that eating like stereotypical cavemen is how the human body is supposed to survive. Even though scientists disagree that our ancestors actually ate the diets these influencers are promoting, the theory has gained a lot of followers. But while Johnson wasn't the only person promoting this, he made a brand as being more extreme. Johnson claimed to be adding back elements to his life that had been removed by modern living. This meant eating a diet of raw animal organs, tough physical exercise, and stereotypical masculinity. One early video script included Johnson bringing in grocery shopping, but he scrapped it as he didn't believe this was a man's job. Johnson had the appearance to back up the claims that the lifestyle was best for keeping physically fit. Comments on his Instagram and TikTok videos included people asking if he modeled or suggesting he get into competitive bodybuilding. It was a lifestyle he sold to his fans, or primals as he called them. He promoted that anybody could develop his physique and that the lifestyle also improved the mental health of young men. But almost as soon as Johnson made his social media debut, other fitness influencers were skeptical that everything was as natural as he claimed. Johnson was interviewed by media outlets and podcasts, and the question of performance-enhancing substances would come up a lot. Each time, Johnson denied taking any hormones or similar substances to get his physique. In 2022, he was confronted with evidence that he could not deny. Another YouTuber named More Plates, More Dates posted an hour-long video titled The Liver King Lie. The video included emails sent by Johnson where he outlined just what substances he was taking. In the email, he claimed to have been working out for 35 years, but as he reached his mid-40s, he was finding it harder and harder to keep up the lifestyle. He was working with a pharmacy to figure out a mixture of hormones and substances to help him, which amounted to $11,000 a month. Johnson continued to post videos on his social media channels after this, but he no longer gets the attention that he previously received. Number 4. In January of 2013, a sports news website broke a very strange story about a college football player, Notre Dame's Manti Te'o, who'd been one of the stars of the season and gained admiration for his strength and perseverance in the wake of the passing of his grandmother and girlfriend. A tip sent to the website revealed that not everything was as it seemed. According to Te'o, he met his girlfriend back in 2009. She was a student at Stanford University, and they met when Teo played a game against the Stanford team. Her name was Lene Kekwa, and she had Samoan ancestry like Teo. They exchanged phone numbers and over the next few years talked often. Kekwa was interested in football. She was also multilingual and a gifted musician, according to Teo. They would meet up when both visited Hawaii, and over time, a romantic relationship began. Teo's college football career was growing alongside his relationship. By 2012, he was one of the star players, and through that season, he helped the Notre Dame Fighting Irish to 12 victories. Things began to get difficult in Teo's home life at some point in early 2012. Kekwa had been in a car accident and was rushed to the hospital. Teo couldn't be by her side, but would phone her every night. They would fall asleep while on the phone. While in the hospital, Kekwa learned she had leukemia. She seemed to be responding to treatment and was actually released from the hospital on September 10th, but the following day, things took a turn for the worse again. She passed away either that night or the following day, within hours of Teo's grandmother. It was devastating to the young footballer, but he'd promised his girlfriend he would play in her honor. He helped win the game against Michigan State that weekend. A look back at news reports from the time showed some inconsistencies, but it was nothing that anybody picked up. It would be easy to confuse some details given everything he had been through. But this wasn't simple confusion. Lene Kekwa never existed. It was all a hoax. When the story first broke in January of 2013, it was assumed that Teo was in on the scheme. He'd allegedly met her multiple times, and it seemed impossible that he didn't know. But the truth was, he had no idea that it was all a scam until December. Months after Kekwa supposedly passed away, he received a call from someone claiming to be her. She even sent photos as proof of life. She claimed she'd faked her passing to escape people related to illegal substances. Teo had lied about meeting Kekwa before, as he didn't want his family to believe he was in on a relationship with someone he'd never met. But he truly had no idea that Kekwa was playing him the whole time. Number 3. For years, the life of Elizabeth Finch sounded like something out of the show she worked on, Grey's Anatomy. She lived with an extremely rare cancer that required ongoing treatment. She'd gone through a series of traumatic incidents that left her with crippling mental health conditions, and she had to end life support treatment for a brother who'd been cruel to her growing up. But the stories were just that, stories. Finch worked on Grey's Anatomy from 2015 to 2022, writing 13 episodes and producing 172. Some of the storylines introduced to the show came from Finch's own life, or at least the life that she told her friends and coworkers about. It had been one of these stories that earned her the role in the first place. While working on another show, she was diagnosed with an extremely rare form of bone cancer. But even though the doctors didn't give her much hope, she persevered and continued to work alongside her treatment. She also wrote an essay about her experience for the magazine Elle. Showrunners at Grey's Anatomy were impressed by her work, and Finch joined the team soon after. Finch became the show's expert on cancer. Her illness meant she was continuously going through treatment and had more experience in that area than anybody else. That included other survivors who worked on the show. She introduced a storyline where a character had the same form of cancer that she did and battled with doctors in the same way that she had. But it wasn't only her own life that Finch found inspiration in. Another storyline came from a traumatic story told by a friend. Away from work, one of Finch's friends was a victim of a violent attack. Finch took time away from work to help deal with the loss and had to seek help from a mental health facility. It was there she met her future wife, another patient at the facility named Jennifer. The two became close friends, and after their treatment, they started a romance together. In early 2020, they were married. Not long after this, Finch's lies began to unravel. Jennifer was a trained nurse and noticed some of the holes in Finch's stories. Scrolling through her social media account, she realized Finch hadn't lost her eyebrows or eyelashes during chemotherapy treatment. There were also photos showing bandages over a spot where a chemo port would have been. But Jennifer knew Finch didn't have a port scar there. The bandages were shoddily done and not the work of a medical professional. There was also evidence of other lies. Finch's story about losing a friend in a violent attack was untrue. She'd previously told coworkers her brother had lost his life, but he was alive and well, working as a doctor in Florida. Finch was confronted about the lies. At first, she tried to claim that she had once had cancer. When she recovered, she continued the story because she liked the attention. But the lack of a port scar proved this was still a lie. Elizabeth Finch never had cancer. There'd been no ongoing treatment and no complications. She never had a kidney transplant. In 2022, Disney opened an investigation into Finch's lies, and she was placed on administrative leave before resigning. Number 2. Tonya Harding is one of the most famous figure skaters to have never won an Olympic medal. Her ice skating career was cut short after her ex-husband orchestrated an attack against her rival in 1994. For decades, Harding insisted she had no prior knowledge of the attack. It wasn't until an ABC special about her, titled Truth and Lies, that she admitted the truth. The 1994 Winter Olympics were held in Norway in February. The United States was allowed to send 2 athletes for the ladies' singles event, and there was fierce competition to earn the spots. The previous Olympic gold medalist, Kristi Yamaguchi, had retired, and Harding looked set to take over as the US's top figure skater. But there were others hoping to take that spot. Among them was Nancy Kerrigan, who won a bronze medal at the 1992 Winter Olympics. The decision of who would be selected for the Olympic team hinged on their performances at the US Figure Skating Championships. Before the event, other skaters had received threats. A news report from the time stated even Harding was scared for her safety and had hired bodyguards to protect her. Kerrigan wasn't taking any such precautions. On the night of January 6th, after practice for the event, Kerrigan was attacked. She was struck by a baton-like object in the leg. The aftermath was captured by cameras recording the practice. Her father carried her away as she cried out in pain, asking why something like this happened to her. While Kerrigan was in the hospital, the championships went ahead. Harding placed first, ahead of Michelle Kwan. Kerrigan wasn't able to compete. Thankfully, the attack hadn't broken any bones. She was able to walk but was in too much pain to compete in the championships. But the skaters all agreed she had earned her spot on the Olympic team and was to be sent instead of Kwan. An investigation was already underway into the attack. It wasn't long before suspicion fell on Harding. The FBI interviewed people from her entourage, and one of her bodyguards admitted the truth. Harding's ex-husband, Jeff Gillooly, had plotted the attack. The person who actually did the deed was hired hitman Shane Stant, but it was the people closest to Harding who were truly responsible. Harding denied any involvement in the attack and was shocked when the truth came out, but the FBI didn't believe the story. They told Kerrigan that even though they didn't have any proof, they believed she was the mastermind. Harding to this day has denied being the person responsible. Later in life, she claimed Gillooly was violent towards her, and she feared for her life when she was around him. But when legal proceedings began, Harding pleaded guilty to conspiring to hinder prosecution. She now claimed she'd learned afterwards that Gillooly was behind the attack, but hadn't come forward with information. Harding was handed a fine and sentenced to community service and 3 years probation. She was allowed to compete in the Olympics, but was then barred from taking part in any other competitions. Number 1. Olympic athletes represent their countries on the world stage. Ahead of the 2016 Games in Brazil, US athletes were warned to be on their best behavior and not to disrespect their host. This had been going well until swimmer Ryan Lochte reported a horrifying armed robbery. It was an armed robbery that didn't happen. Before the Rio Olympic Games, there had been a lot of media speculation surrounding the city's safety. Rio had a reputation as one of the most dangerous cities in the world. The government had been trying to combat that reputation, but stories of tourists being kidnapped and taken to ATMs were unfortunately still common. Security was increased during the Games, but that didn't stop some athletes from running into trouble. Nobody was seriously hurt, but it seemed like some athletes came close during the central weekend of the 2-week event. Ryan Lochte was one of the most successful swimmers in US history. He'd already won multiple Olympic medals before the Rio Games. On August 9th of 2016, he added one more medal to his total when he took gold for the 4x200 meter freestyle relay. A few days later, Lochte and the other US swimmers went out to celebrate their success at a party hosted by the French authorities. The group enjoyed themselves, staying out well into the early hours of the morning. It was past 5 a.m. when they finally piled into a taxi to return to the Olympic Village, a drive of between 30 minutes and an hour. When the group were captured on CCTV at the village, they seemed to still be in good spirits. Lochte was seen waving his credentials about and didn't appear to be in any trouble. But not long after, news broke that the group had been the victims of an armed robbery. The story first came from Lochte's mother, but he later confirmed it. According to Lochte, the taxi they were traveling in was stopped by men posing as police officers. They didn't have uniforms or lights, but were carrying a police badge. They ordered the swimmers to get on the floor. Lochte tried to resist. He told the fake officers they'd done nothing wrong and they wouldn't be getting on the floor. But that was when the robber turned his weapon on Lochte and he gave in. The robbers took their wallets and money but left behind their credentials and passports. Rio de Janeiro police immediately began investigating the crime, but the swimmers claimed they were unable to remember the color or make of the taxi, or exactly where the crime had even taken place. They didn't have any details for the police to follow up on. The police also couldn't find the taxi driver who'd come under attack. And it didn't take long for the truth to come out. Lochte first changed his story, saying they'd stopped at a gas station to use the bathroom when they were attacked, but the police believed something else entirely had happened at the gas station. One of the other athletes confessed to the truth. The swimmers had been struck when they stopped at the gas station and caused damage to the property. They'd tried to leave, but the owner wanted the athletes to pay for damages. A security guard stopped the taxi and forced them out. The men paid $20 in US dollars and 100 Brazilian real. When the truth came out, the US Olympic Committee and USA Swimming suspended Lochte for 10 months for the lie. The other swimmers were suspended for 4 months. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.